I'm a department head in mathematics and statistics, and for a long time, I was a faculty member at the University of Oklahoma, went up through the ranks, assistant, associate, full chair professor, and then I took a leave of absence to serve as a program director at the National Science Foundation for 4 years, from 2018 to 2022. And then at the time, I was sort of looking for jobs, and this job came around, and decided to move here from Oklahoma, because the program director role was always meant to be temporary. So there are two types of program directors, what are called rotators and what are called permanents. But in practical terms, you do the same job. So I will start off by telling you some general things about grants, about the NSF, and then some things that I know that are happening there. Very little, right? So it's a little bit like, government service in general, but once you leave, I still have friends, but they never talk about what goes on, right? That's sort of part of the deal. It's not like I can call them up and say, so who are you funding these days? They're not going to answer. So that's part of the culture, is once you leave, you're not in that circle of who needs to know. So the NSF, so everything I'm going to tell you is probably not true anymore. Okay? So almost certainly not true. So I don't know how much of it is true. And I'll share at the end what I know might become, but that really is very speculative. So what I'm telling you now, first is what was true as of last year. So the NSF used to process about 50,000 proposals per year across all its divisions. The NSF is like a giant monolith, and it has what are called directorates. There used to be 8, I think there's now 9 or 10, not 100% sure. And these directorates are like these giant arms, and they operate like little countries. So in particular, there are cultural differences between directorates. The way things happen in one directorate may be a little different than the way they happen in another. By and large, there are many commonalities. The proposed workflow, the way it is routed through the system, how it is judged, all of that. But there are some differences. So in particular, if your proposal is not in the directorate of mathematical and physical sciences, some of what I'm saying may not be exactly right for where you might send it. So in your case, it would be size, and in your case, it would be, I think, the social sciences. So there are some differences, so keep that in mind. So of the 50,000, the Division of Mathematical Sciences, where I work, handled 3,000 a year. So it's a lot of proposals. We had 28 program directors, so about 100 each you have to handle per year. That may or may not sound like a lot, but you had to organize, you have to first you decide who's running what panel, then you have to, months in advance, you have to book rooms, you have to find people, you have to convince people to come and serve on a panel, then you have to assemble the panel, then you have to get the proposal, send it to the panel, and then kind of weed out conflicts of interest is a very, very big deal with the NSF. Right? If for any reason they discover a conflict, then bad things happen. Right? So they're very super careful about conflicts of interest. And then they get the panel in place. People are supposed to read the proposals before they come to the panel. Almost no one does, no matter how many different ways program officers tell them. And then they discuss the proposals there. And they do, almost every panel, did dozens of panels. People do a good job of it. There's always, like with anything, there's always going to be some random person who likes attention or likes to shout and things like that. But that's relatively rare. After the panel is done, they will rank the proposals. there's a ranking board. And there's usually 3 columns on the board. And the names of these columns changed while I was there. There was some raging controversy about what you can call them. They used to be called highly recommended, recommended, and not recommended. And then it was highly competitive, competitive, and not competitive. And then it was something else. Regardless, it basically was, if you were in the first column, you were guaranteed to be funded, right? Unless something really catastrophic happened, right? This is the column that you're going to get funded. But that was less than 10% of the number of proposals in the panel. So if the panel had 35 proposals, there would be 3 in that column. And almost always, and this is not it was not because they were looking to do this, but almost always it was these people from Harvard, MIT, Princeton who were doing exceptional work, groundbreaking, cutting edge stuff. There was one person I knew, he had 25 publications in the previous year, he had written 3 books, had done undergraduate curriculum reform for calculus, had served as undergraduate advisor for 8 students, had mentored 3 PhD students and 2 postdocs. So, and he had, like, half of his papers were in the very best journals. And he was an editor for the best journal in the world.
Was he human?
And it didn't hurt that he's like one of the nicest people around, right? Faculty member at MIT. So when you look at that and you compare, how can you not award him?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very clear. Most cases are not so clear. Most of the battle happens in the middle column, right? So there's a certain order in which the proposals are given to the panel, and that order is essentially random, right? The program officers are not deciding who goes first, but there is a social aspect to the ordering, right? Initially, people are like really jittery, and they put everybody really low. And then they're like, wait, it's not that bad, and they try to jack people up a little bit. And then they get nervous because time is ticking, because people like to talk, and they're like, wait, we still have 20 proposals to go, and we have 4 hours or something, right? And then they start booting people to the right, not recommended. But somehow or the other, more or less, a pretty fair picture emerges. The fight takes place in the middle. Because what happens is the program officers would say, the funding rate is 25%. We want you to draw a line at 30%, right? Wherever that line is. And it's almost always in the middle or slightly lower than the middle column. Right? What that means is everybody below that line not getting funded. Right? So the not recommended, not a problem, in the sense that the panel already said not recommended. It's relatively not going to be a huge problem for the program officer to write a report saying this was not recommended because it's just simply not competitive enough in this panel. The hard ones are the ones that were close to the line but just below it, and then people are fighting. No, this person had 3 publications, this person had 2, but the 2 are in better journals than these 3. Anyway, one way or the other, it finishes. There's some unhappy people in the room, but it's done. It doesn't mean that the people above the line are getting funded, by the way. What did I say? People in the left column, definitely funded. People in the right column, definitely not funded. People below the line, not funded. People above the line, may be funded. So then, as they start distributing the money, and it's not just to that panel or that program, each program like the one I was in, we handle 8 panels, 8 different mathematical areas within geometry and topology, and you start doling out money. You can't give all the money to one area. You start doling out money, right? As you start doling out, after the highly recommended, they start at the very top of recommended, and they start moving their way down, and then usually within like 1 or 2 lines, money runs out. And now you're left with a bunch of names from each panel that has not been funded. And then there's a second round of deliberations that goes on. It's called equalization. And what that is, it's not a panel, it's a panel of program directors. So we all get together as program directors, we get all these names, and we put them in a spreadsheet, and now they're not ranked, because they were all in this area, in the top of the middle column, right? And we put their names down. And then we have a very long, very detailed meeting about each one. There's usually about 20 to 30 of these proposals, and then we try to balance how we've made the awards. About maybe last year this particular area got more, so now this other area we're going to balance it out. Or this particular PI has applied 4 times and been rejected, but always seems to end up in equalization. We'll give them a shot, that sort of thing. All other things being equal. That's so. We also look at contributions and panel reviews and all of these other things. So that's sort of how all of that. And during these discussions, of course, everything comes into play: intellectual merit, broader impacts, and the ability to advance somebody in a more junior state in their career versus a more senior person, all kinds of considerations of that. So, and then when equalization is done, there are some avenues for looking for money which are very low probability events. There are usually some programs outside the directorate run by the director of the NSF directly that will try to say, well, if you have a proposal from Kentucky or Mississippi, there's a list of states, it's called F-score. Right? If you have a proposal from there, we'll pay half. And so then there's some horse trading goes on. Oh, wait a second, this equalization proposal, we thought we were not going to fund it, but if we get half from them, we fund it and take that other half and fund this junior person who's not asking for a lot of money. That's what comes in. But that's really outlier stuff, right? That maybe 1 proposal a year, maybe 2 get funded that way. And then it's done. But by this time it's July, game over. Right? So, any questions so far?
Don't be shy.
Well,
So I was wondering that they are just looking at the profile of those people submitting. What about the contents of this proposal?
no, what I was telling about the profile comes at the very end. Almost all of it is about the proposal itself, because they're judging not the person but the proposal. When I talked about profile, I don't mean they're deciding whether, are you very good looking or something, right? But the question is, are you going to support 4 PhD students versus a proposal that's going to support 3, right? That's what I mean. So, and what stage of your career are you in, right? If you're a senior faculty member with tenure, and your proposal is kind of on par with somebody who's tenure track, then they'll say, well, maybe we take a chance on the junior person, right? To give them a boost. That's what I mean. But that comes at the very end of the process.
I think, and maybe I misunderstood you, a lot of the examples that you gave had to do with how many publications and the person had and such, and how much do they weight that kind of reputation or profile versus the actual intellectual and broader
Right,
impact.
so maybe I misspoke. So what I was trying to say about the person who I was describing who got this highly recommended, the record was fantastic, but it was really what was in the proposal that mattered the most. And at the end of the day, that is what counts. Sometimes the people on the panel will say, oh, this is a very famous person. The program director will say, so what? Right? It's great that they have done great work in the past, but what is in the proposal that they're going to tell us that they're going to do? How promising is it? So now I'll talk about the intellectual merit part, which is arguably the most important part of your proposal. All right. So what is the little bit I know that's happening now is The NSF's budget as of last year was 10 billion, right? And it included this new directorate called TIP, Technology and Innovations and Partnerships. There are 3 budgetary proposals in front of Congress right now. One is from the White House, which cuts the budget by about 60%, 55 to 60%. And then there's one from the House of Representatives, which cuts it by about $1 billion, right, about 10%, and asks the NSF to get rid of 2 directorates, SBE and the education. I don't know if it's still called education.
I guess last I checked, EDU.
EDU.
Yeah.
And the Senate, which is the least damaging in a way, it cuts $500 million and doesn't ask for any directorates to be charged. It's anybody's guess what will happen. And I also don't know how exactly they're judging broader impacts now, because of a lot of the enforcement against DEI and various things. I just don't know. But one way to find out is to get on a call with the program director and ask them. So in the Division of Mathematical Sciences, they used to have a monthly information session. It's just a webinar, you go in, they'll talk about various programs, and you get to ask questions. I don't know if they're still doing that. But that's a great way to find out. What is it?
Most of them are still.
But you can ask them, what does it mean to have broader impact? But I'm only going to talk about intellectual. Okay, so when you get your proposal into any division, and it goes to a program director, they assign it to the panel, let's say. The instruction to the panel always, both before and during, is judge the proposal, not the person. It doesn't matter who it is, judge the proposal. So there are 2 components to this, right? So, and this is this article I sent you all that I published last year on how to try to get your proposal funded. It's a bit of a delicate game, which is the following. They're going to look at your track record, right? So suppose you go in and say, I'm going to solve one of the most famous problems in my field. Great. What's your track record? Why should we believe that you are capable of solving this problem? And there are 2 parts to that. One part is the track record. What is your publication record? Have you worked in this area? Have you contributed to this area? Are people aware of what you can do in this area, so that we can believe that you have a chance at doing what you say? Even if they're not looking necessarily that you will solve the entire problem, but even if you can make progress. The other leg of that is how concrete is your proposal to describe a strategy to get to that result. Okay? And this is where things get tricky, because some people are like, well, if I tell you how exactly I'm going to do it, somebody on the panel may steal my idea. It doesn't happen. But I mean, at least 4 years and hundreds of proposals, of thousands that I saw, people are too busy, right? But some people are always very cagey. They put very little details that will hurt you. But if you put too much detail, right, then you sacrifice space. There's only 15 pages. So it's a delicate balancing game. How much should you put? It's a little bit of a toss-up. It depends on your area. The people judging you are, people in your field or related fields, right? And I saw already even within mathematics, there were some areas in mathematics where they were okay with less detail. Some were very much like, show me what you have. So that's the delicate part. You can't know until you've submitted a proposal a few times, maybe it got rejected. You read the reviews, they are usually pretty indicative of what your peer group is thinking about what you write. So the intellectual merit part, this is the balancing act you have. You want to give them something to get excited about. You want to show them that this is an important problem that you're working on. So not everybody's going to say, I'm going to solve the biggest problem. They might say, I'm going to solve this intermediate problem. But not everybody looking at it is necessarily as excited about it as you are. So you want to draw on, you want to tell a story. You want to draw on history, saying, look, there's this history of this subject, and there's lots of beautiful problems, and then this particular problem, if it gets solved, has the potential to advance the field because it may provide a crucial step in this larger framework. So tell a story. State the problem, right? And then talk about what you've done so far, and then how you plan to attack it. So they're not necessarily looking for a complete solution right there, but they're looking for a plan. And you want to convince them that you have a chance, a good chance of making progress on the plan. That's all it's about. Now, how you structure it, should you talk about your previous work first and then talk about the problems, or should you talk about each problem and then talk about in each one your previous work and your plan? That's really up to you. It's a stylistic thing, right? I've seen both things be successful and both things fail. It really depends on how well you write. So you want to show that there's meat there, there's some real serious work there, right? If you just wave your hands like, to quote data science, this is a beautiful machine learning algorithm and I will develop it. People will see through that, right? They want details. They want to know that you understand what's going on. They want to know that there's depth to what you're doing, and they want to know that you have a good plan to do it. So that's the heart of it, and that is what will make or break your proposal. So all the things I mentioned about how the proposals are judged, it comes down to these things. People will say, this proposal was very well written, whereas this one, not at all. And if you don't write well, people have not much time, right? They're not spending months reading your proposal. And they will read your proposal before they discuss it. Each discussion, on average, takes 12 minutes. Right? So in 12 minutes, they're going to decide where you go up on the board. That can change, but usually not very much. Right? Panels are loath because it's like dominoes. You change one, and then they start arguing about all the ones that you skipped or didn't skip. And people are like, no, I don't want to relitigate all that. So those 12 minutes are crucial because the panel, they're all talking about your proposal. They're saying, I found this problem very well stated, or this problem didn't have enough history. And so this is where you have to be, this is the delicate part, you have to write extremely well, you have to be convincing, and you have to be honest. And by this I don't mean that people are dishonest. Sometimes people will not share all the information. So it has, here's an example. So we were reading a proposal, and then one of the people on the panel is not just looking at your proposal. They have computers, they go out on the web, they can look at your web page. So PI had written a proposal and then had posted a preprint on the result that was in the proposal. Right? Shortly before the proposal was submitted, it turned out. So PI's like, why wouldn't you say that? Right? It's not that we're going to penalize you. But the PI thought, well, I'll put the problem like I'm going to solve it, and then if I get the funding, I can say, look, I solved it, that kind of thing. That doesn't go over very well. So don't try to finesse the panel like that. In other case, people are like, well, I did all the great work in this area, and then they just don't cite other people. And this is always a tricky thing in science, or in any academic endeavor. Who do you cite? And it turns out one of the people on the panel was really upset that they were not cited. So when in doubt, cite that person when you're talking about the problem. Even if it's to say, so all these people have considered this problem. put down this paper. Doesn't hurt anything. So that's what I mean. If you try to be a little cute, too cute, or finesse the panel, it's not going to go very good. But at the end of the day, it's about the story you tell to convince them that you have a great problem or a set of problems. By the way, you shouldn't just write one. I mean, there are people who write literally 17 projects, and then there are people who write one. Clearly, there's a middle ground between those two. So usually if you have 3 to 5 very good projects that you can describe effectively in 15 pages, because the 15 is not just those 5, there's also broader impacts, right? Introduction and things like that. Then I think that's a good place. But, you know, what I don't want is you're like, well, he told me 3 projects and I did that and I didn't get funded. Well, most people don't get funded. I'll stop now so that you have a chance to ask questions.